Well, you could see me.
Hey, man. Hey, everybody. Here we are live again. I'm Derrick. I'm in the Odessa store. That's my friend Kyler. If he'll talk, you can see him in the Midland store.
Hello.
And we have our friend Rick with us again from Georgia.
Hello, everybody.
And so we're just going to talk today, and I'm going to be upfront. Okay. I'm going to tell you straight up front. The topic we're talking about today, I don't know very much about. I know, Rick, you probably have a little experience with it, but Kyler is going to do a lot of the demonstration. So I'm just kind of trying and ask questions that I would ask as a person that doesn't know anything, almost like it would work out. You guys, if you have any questions, type them in. Rick's going to monitor that, make sure that we see your questions. So what we're talking about today, Kyler, I think you and I were having a discussion, and you guys may or may not know this, but Kyler is I've played bass most of my adult life. Whether it's in church or in bands or whatever. And I'm kind of trying to transition over into some more rhythm guitar playing. And I've always had an acoustic guitar, and I could just bang around on it and have a big time. And, but I didn't really know a lot about guitar. And so I've got an electric that I'm learning some things on, and we're going to do some more conversations about pedals and pedal boards and amplifiers and the difference. I've kind of tried to get to the difference between hype and reality. This is what you really need versus all the really cool loud toys. If Andrew's watching, he'll probably run back here and tell me there's no such thing as hype on pedals. You can never have enough, and they all do something cool and unique, and you'll need it at some point in your life. But today I thought I'd ask Kyler more about the setup of a guitar because acoustic, and correct me, you can jump in anytime you want to, either one of you. Acoustic seems to need less setup. I've had acoustics as long as it's hydrated correctly and there's no weird things going on with your neck. I just don't know that there's a lot more setup to do on an acoustic. True or false?
Generally with acoustics, I think a lot of it takes more tech work. Because if you need an adjustment on a bridge on an acoustic, well, an electric, which is what we're going to go into, you can adjust anything on an electric bridge, but on an acoustic, you actually would have to physically shave down the saddle.
But now that you say that, I remember being in the Midland store. And if you guys don't know, we have a fantastic luthier in the Midland store. His name is Joe Shepard. A lot of you, if you played guitar around here for any amount of time, you know who Joe is, and you know that he's amazing. I've seen him actually take bone bridges off and file them in certain places to make it set. Is that for action? Is that what he's doing?
Yeah, I've seen him actually take a full square piece of bone and create a complete bridge out of it. It's amazing.
So that's something it's not a do-it-yourself kind of project.
Right. No. And Joe, I know a lot of times he'll actually create a new bridge because if, say, you have a high-end guitar, you might want to keep the original bridge intact like it is, and then, like what Rick is saying, he'll just build a brand new one.
Fabricate one.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Same thing on the nut?
Yeah, same thing.
Cool. But, again, back to my initial, I think my point's still valid. Beyond stuff that a tech would do or dressing your frets, there's not a lot of setup you do on an acoustic guitar. Is that still a false statement?
I don't know if that would be an exact statement. Acoustics, because of how they're designed, I think they could fluctuate a lot more. But typically you have a little bit of a margin of error because you don't want, most acoustics don't have action quite as low as an electric. So like because of that, it can actually take those fluctuations a little bit better.
Well, then would it be fair to say it this way? There's less setup done less frequently on an acoustic than on an electric.
I think generally, I mean, I'll just use the guitars that we get in. I think we tend to get more electric guitars for setup than we do acoustics. And I think
talk about coming through the door for that purpose, not things that we buy, but things, customer stuff.
Yeah, okay, cool. Exactly. It's customer stuff.
I think you've also proven the point, though, that you can't say that with certainty. There may be an issue. And so that leads me to one of my, I've got two questions. I'm going to come at this two different ways. Number one, do they not come set up from the factory? Are guitars not set up from the factory? What factors influence whether it arrives set up or not?
Well, guitar manufacturers, they do come with a setup from the factory. And I think in general, modern guitars are set up a lot better than maybe stuff from the past. But the problem is they kind of set everything at I guess you would say a middle level. So, because they don't know where they're going to ship the guitar once it actually gets to Fender or Ibanez or whoever it is that has the guitar. So they don't want to set something up with really low action, and then it goes somewhere that's humid, and then all of a sudden you have a guitar that's unplayable.
Okay, so there was the rest of that question. Is climate involved?
Exactly. So like I said, they kind of think find a middle ground. So regardless of where the guitar goes, it will still be playable.
Right. But so it's for the play out of the box.
Right. Exactly. And I think any manufacturer, what they want you to do is take a guitar out of the box and just have some small adjustments from there.
And I need to say straight up front, no, this is no diss on any manufacturer. This is physics and weather.
Exactly. I mean, logistically, it would just mean that it just doesn't make sense. That's kind of on the dealers to do, I think, the final setup, which is kind of where we come into play.
Sure. Okay. So that's one side that I'm coming at. Does it just not come set up already? The second question I would have, and this would be regardless of if it's new or you've had it for a while, either one of you guys, what is a telltale sign that I may need to get my guitar set up? How would I know that this might not be me playing bad, which is what I usually attribute my problems to? I just don't fret it right, or I just don't make the chord shape good enough. What's a sign that I might need to take this down and let Intune Music look at doing a setup on my guitar?
I think one of the first things, if you're getting fret buzz, that's a major one. A lot of times you'll find people bring in a guitar for intonation. So if you notice, man, I'm playing these chords and it just sounds out of tune, or I'm playing these notes and it sounds out of tune. I think those are some.
Both of you guys have done a lot of lead playing and you played for a long time. Some of us may not know what all the terms you're saying are just naturally. Fret buzz is kind of obvious. If you're playing and you hear a lot of zzz while you're playing, that's fret buzz, correct?
Exactly. And I'll give you a quick example. So if you're playing something, it depends on the velocity. It's hard. If you hit a string really hard, it's going to be hard to not get fret buzz, but it's when you're playing lightly that you would want to bring it in to get adjusted.
Got it.
And I'm going to say that that's also going to be relevant on the type of guitar, because naturally a setup on a guitar like what Kyler has there compared to somebody that's using one with a Floyd Rose tremolo, it's going to be a lot more setup involved in a Floyd Rose type setup than there are in a tailpiece like the one that's on that Fender there.
Well, I was going to get into that as well. And not even, here's the story. Tremolos and there's no purpose. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to use it. So the Tele I'm playing on right now doesn't have any kind of a tremolo or a whammy bar or anything on purpose.
Right.
Naturally, I think that helps with keeping the guitar in tune. I may be wrong, but that's what I think. And, I hear stories that if you have a floating tremolo, then that's even more of a nightmare. Yes.
I think it is harder to set up. I mean, I think anybody would tell you that's ever messed with a Floyd Rose. But like a Floyd Rose, it's supposed to, the design of it is actually, it's supposed to stay in tune better than even a fixed bridge guitar like your Telecaster.
Once you get it there.
Yeah, once you set it up. So I think let's break this down into two categories.
Okay.
Most time when people get a setup, it's either that they just got the guitar and it hasn't been set up properly, whether that's because it came in from another climate and it got set up, or they just get it set up. And we do this for customers. If they buy a guitar, we'll ask them if there's anything that they want us to change regarding the setup.
Okay, as far as string height or...
Well, and like Fender guitars come stock with 9-gauge strings, but they might be someone that plays 10, so then you have to get a whole new setup for that guitar.
Okay.
Or it's when something has changed. A lot of times it's the weather, and then they have to get something adjusted.
Okay. As I have a tendency to do, I started talking too much. One of you define intonation. The intonation is off. What are you talking about?
Well, the intonation is actually the distance from the nut to the saddle. So I'm going to try to get a little better angle on this. if you see on any electric guitar down here, now this is a Strat guitar, and probably the most common, this is what you would call the bridge, and then the saddle is a piece of the bridge. And then it would go up here to the nut. So you're changing the distance.
Is that your Strat?
Yeah, this one's mine.
Is that roasted? Is that neck roasted? What is it?
No, this one's just all rosewood.
Rosewood. That's okay. Cool. Pretty guitar, man. So anyway, intonation, you say it's off. How do you know? I mean, because again, limited understanding. So if I'm wrong, when do you say, no. You can tune the guitar open string and still have your intonation off.
Correct. Now I'm stealing this directly from Joe. Now Joe couldn't be here with us today. But a lot of these things I've learned are from Joe. So I don't want to, I want people to know Joe's the real
we all know
of information here.
Joe's the man.
So basically with Joe, the traditional thing is if you tune your guitar to where the open string is in tune, you try to set the intonation so that when you're playing on the 12th fret, it's also going to read the same as when it's open.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that's an octave higher than the open string.
Correct. Now, this is something that Joe does. He said it depends on what kind of player you are. So you still want to use that 12th fret as a feeler, I guess you'd say.
Okay.
But he also says, if you're a chord player, you're going to want to play down here, say from the 3rd fret to the 5th fret. That's going to be mostly where you're playing. So he said you might, while you're doing the intonation, look at the 3rd fret, look at the 5th fret, see if you need to make any adjustments on that.
So when you say the fret numbers, you're basically talking for the DCG players,
Right, exactly. Because a guitar is not a perfect instrument.
Oh, come on.
Intonation's all relative as far as that goes.
Okay, cool. So we're back on telltale signs that I might need a setup. Intonation may be off, which is when we notice that when we're playing higher up the neck, it's not in tune, even though we tune the open string. Correct.
And a lot of the stuff, what we're trying to do is to show people at home. Right now, you can't bring your guitar to us to work on because of the coronavirus. So we're trying to give some tips on easy things to do at home. So intonation might be off.
Intonation.
I'd say a big one is the action. So if you notice, a lot of times you might notice changes, or a lot of people don't even notice this, and there are a lot of things you can do to help it. What if your action is too high? Because I think a lot of people that are playing struggle with their strings are too high.
Superstar, define action, so we all know what we're talking about.
Sure. The action basically is how high is the string from the fretboard. So it is kind of hard to see because you would have to get pretty close to the neck to actually see action. But just look at how far your strings are from the neck. And if you have a considerable distance to press down, that means your action is probably too high.
I notice my action when it feels like I'm almost playing on, it's like a trampoline feel. The strings come back with my fingers as I lift it off. I don't know if that makes sense to you. And you almost get this kind of a sound, and I'm associating this with the bass. That's when I start to notice that maybe my neck's not in perfect alignment. So
right. Yeah. And you shouldn't, a guitar shouldn't be hard as far as when you're first learning. You should not have to press down incredibly hard after you've been playing for a few months and you've gained some muscle memory.
Sure. When I notice the setup more than anything is as soon as I put on new strings. Usually when it's dead, the strings are dead and I'm not hearing a lot of extraneous noise. But if the setup's off, as soon as I put a bright set of new strings on, I notice all kinds of noises, and I have to analyze and look at the guitar to see, is that just the new string noise or is something actually going on?
Well, and actually you bring up something that I wanted to mention. Now we're trying to help people with their setups, but I think the first thing that you're going to do if you're going to set up a guitar, now a lot of people, I think, never think of this. I didn't think about this for a while until I had an employee that used to work here at Intune tell me probably about 10 years ago. And he said, always change the strings whenever you're doing a setup. So you don't want to adjust something based on old strings because it's not an accurate representation of what it's supposed to be.
And I guess it's cart before the horse. The first thing you need to do is change strings, then worry about the setup.
Right. So we could kind of break down that process if you're someone at home, what are the steps you should go through if that's all right with you.
All right. So I've asked a lot of questions. Most of the things you talked about so far has been strings. Is there anything we're worried about? I guess intonation includes the saddles and the bridge. Is there any other facet of a setup that we would talk about just so we can get that out of the way?
Sure. Actually, the first thing I would do after the strings is look at the relief of the guitar. So this might be a new term to a lot of people. So if you look at a neck, imagine you have a guitar neck that's perfectly straight. Well, a guitar neck is not designed to be perfectly straight.
That would be an issue if you have.
Right. So that might be the first thing. If you notice, man, the strings are very low and they're buzzing. And if you notice it more if you kind of hear a buzz more towards the middle of the neck, that just means that your truss rod is too tight.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people might not know what a truss rod is, and I think I have a diagram if I could find it. I guess I can't. But basically, there's a metal rod inside the neck that counteracts the tension of the strings so that you never... you can always accommodate for that regardless of which environment that you're in.
Okay, let me see if I can show off. A neck is a solid piece of wood, whether that's rosewood, maple, or whatever the main neck material is. They dig a channel in it and they put a steel rod, steel or whatever metal they want to put in there. I don't know exactly if it's steel or titanium.
Right.
Or
traditionally it's steel.
And and then it has adjustment rod nuts and bolts on either end or on one end. It's got an anchor up by the headstock, and then you can tighten it or loosen it right where your right hand is. Correct?
Right, and it
and then they put
actually
the fingerboard.
that depends on the guitar. I'll show you real quick.
Well, basic concept is there's a rod in there. I can see the adjustment there.
Right. So most guitars are going to have it at this end of the fingerboard.
Okay.
If some vintage style Strats and Telecasters have it right here in between the neck and the neck pickup.
And then they put the fingerboard on top, which is the last piece of the neck, correct?
Right. And like I said, that all that depends on is how they design your neck to begin with.
And so what that rod does is if you increase tension, it's going to put a bend into your neck. Correct?
Correct.
If you release tension, it's going to straighten the neck. And that counteracts, as you were saying.
Right. It counteracts the string tension that you have on the guitar.
Okay. So truss rod adjustment.
Right, exactly. And that's been one of the best things I think to happen to guitar necks, because there used to not be truss rods. And we have a bass here right now that someone brought in from the 60s that doesn't have a truss rod, and it's just one of those things you can't fix it at all.
And that's what we hate to tell people. I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do for that.
Right.
Okay. So strings, adjustment of the truss rod. I keep sidetracking you.
Sure. And then I think something else that you can do, which is why I brought this out here. My guitar, I don't think needs it because I did this pretty recently. But this is some deoxit. It's just an electronic spray.
Right.
And I brought this out because I think that's something that's very easy to do at home. And I'm going to grab another guitar real quick that's a little easier to show you. This is a Gibson Les Paul. Most people are probably pretty familiar with a guitar like this. But anytime you change the strings now in a Les Paul, it's pretty easy to change it because they have a cavity in the back. I would just say go ahead and spray the electronics in it, because that's something that, especially here in West Texas, can happen pretty easily if you need to clean it out because you start hearing some scratchiness or you start hearing just some noises that maybe you weren't used to before.
So it's oxidation, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. So that de-ox, it just basically is a good thing to do every time you change the strings, or depending on how often you change them, maybe every other time.
Okay.
That way you don't have to take off new strings to spray.
Okay. So here's what I'd like to do. And Rick, you butt in anytime you want to. I have asked a bunch of questions. I'm just going to be quiet now, and you just talk to us about a setup, what normal things would happen, what one of our friends could expect if they brought their guitar to us for us to do in a normal setup.
Sure. So I'll stick with this guitar since we've talked about the Strat some. Now the Les Paul and any Gibson style guitar, and there's a lot of guitars that have copied the same setup as far as the bridge goes.
Really?
So one of the first things I would do is take off the strings, like we said, clean. At that point, you need to decide has your guitar been playing well or not, and you can do a few adjustments from there. Now I grabbed some lemon oil. This might be something people are familiar with. If you have anything that's not finished, maple is typically the only wood that you'll see on a neck that's finished. So if you see,
and I'm a rosewood guy.
Rosewood typically never has any sort of lacquer finish on it. So
Correct.
It's just the natural wood. So that's what the lemon oil is, to help lubricate that and
keep it from drying out, cracking.
Exactly. So that's really easy to get. We have some here. So feel free to contact us if you like any of that. It's also a good time to clean your guitar. So a lot of these hard to reach spots, I could see it now on this guitar, in between the bridge and the tailpiece.
The dust collectors?
Yeah, exactly. So that would be the first thing. Now, a bridge like this is very easy to adjust. It has some thumb wheels on it. So that adjusts the total height of the bridge. Now, when we go back to the Strat, it has a totally different design. So we'll talk about that. There's a thing called radius on your guitar. The radius is basically how curved the fingerboard is. Now, on a guitar like this, the bridge is fixed so that it matches that curvature of the neck. And that actually what helps create a natural feeling playability. I'm going to go back to the Strat.
I was going to start a flat earth argument.
Right.
Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not curved.
So it'll be kind of hard to see. But right there in the saddles, they are different heights. Because with the Fender, they let you individually adjust. I mean, it's been like that.
So it's not one height for the bridge. It's each saddle gets its own height if you choose.
Right, exactly. So now, and this is where I'll talk a little bit. All this stuff I do just by the fact that I've done this on my own guitars. There are measurements, Fender, if you go to their website, which we could post a link to in the comments if you're interested. They have a specific setup guide for what they recommend. But if you go off the Fender setup, you don't always have the lowest action. I like my guitar set up with a little lower action than that. So if you're someone that likes
a shredder, so yeah.
Well, I don't know if I'd say shredder. I don't want to claim.
Just getting reactions.
Don't want to claim that. But I think this will really help if you're wanting your guitar to play better. So the first thing, like we talked about, you get the neck, ideally where it has a little bit of bow. So you'll notice it's lower down by the nut. And then the action should be a little higher in the middle, and then it'll be lower by the end of the fingerboard. Now, the first thing I would say, if you're adjusting a truss rod and you've never done it before, feel free to call us, because that's something that's very easy to damage, something that's very easy to, and it's actually one of the things that a lot of people are scared of with working on. I was scared of it for a long time.
Might we say the old adage, less is more? Always do tiny things, not big things.
And the first thing is make sure you actually have the right truss rod wrench, because that's one of the easiest ways. If you strip out the nut on your truss rod, you won't be able to adjust it again. So we'll be glad if you call us, like I said, to help you figure out what you need. Anything that you can get, you can pretty much find at a hardware store. I mean, it's just Allen wrenches, so you might see something like this. They came in the guitar that you bought, and you might actually have a set of these lying around. And
if you just buy an index, are they metric or are they SA?
Typically metric on most stuff. Even okay. It's strange. Even this American-made guitar has a metric truss rod wrench.
Okay.
Except for when you get to Gibson's, and this is American. Okay. I was curious, Rick. I didn't want to go too much longer. Before, if we've had any questions, has anyone asked anything?
We haven't really had any questions as much as we've had a couple of comments. This one from Gold AC goes back to when we were talking about acoustic guitars. He just said, I feel like people are a lot more accepting of less than perfect setups on acoustics because it does take more work and tools.
Well, he's right. That's actually Andrew from our Odessa store.
He does our setups in the Odessa store. So
perfect. Okay. Well, I wanted to make sure we weren't missing anything in so feel free to leave any comments if you have questions on them.
Okay, help Mr. ADD get back on track. What did we just do? We've taken our strings off. We've used lemon oil. We adjusted our truss rod.
Well, and one thing too, I don't have a wrench on me, but most people have an adjustable crescent wrench. One of the first things that I would do is, if you notice you're having tuning problems specifically, is tying that nut that's on the outside of your tuning machine. So what I'm literally talking about is right below where the string winds, there's a small nut.
Make sure they're
on
tight.
Most guitars, right? That basically secures the tuner in place from the top. I mean, I can't tell you how many acoustics and electrics that have come in, and that's the first thing you adjust. And literally the tuner is just moving because it hasn't been tightened. And that just happens over time. And imagine a guitar vibrating. Well, that's going to loosen stuff up, which is part of where we get problems from.
Okay. So that's neck stuff.
Correct. So like we talked about, strings, if you need to spray the electronics, do that. And then we just did the tuning machines. That's just basically all stuff you could do before you put the new strings on the guitar. If you know that the neck needs adjusting, you can do a small adjustment.
Yeah, we probably don't want to adjust that neck till you get strings on it, right?
Well, you could do a small adjustment because it is easier to adjust when you don't have strings on it.
Okay.
But you wouldn't want to make any large movements. If you just have noticed, hey, my action is a little high, you could say do an eighth of a turn or I'd say an eighth of a turn is probably a safe thing.
Hey, can I jump in here one real quick though? One thing I think we did skip. I noticed you've got a rubber mat that you have your guitar sitting on.
Right.
And is that one of the Music Nomad neck supports there?
It is. So this mat, this is the one we typically use whenever we do setup. So it is kind of beat up. You might see some holes.
No, but my point is you want to set your guitar down on something soft to protect the finish, number one. Number two, if it has some grip to it, your guitar won't slide all over the place while you're trying to work on it.
Exactly. Now, I had it resting on this just because I think it's easier to see that way. And for doing small adjustments, it is better. When you're adjusting the neck, you actually do not want to have it resting on anything at all. So if you're adjusting the neck, you would just lay the guitar flat.
I wish we had that drop in, Rick. Pro tip.
And then you would adjust it from there. Now, this is something that I thought this was the weirdest thing whenever I first heard it. If you play a note while the guitar is resting on this, and then you pick it up, it's very hard to hear, but it actually changes the tuning of that note.
Because of the
so whenever you're making any final adjustments, always put the guitar in the playing position, play it like how you would play it. So I'm someone that plays with a pick a lot. So if I have the guitar where I want to test the setup, I'm going to grab a pick. I'm going to play it like I normally would. I'm going to hit it with the velocity like you normally would. And I say this because one of the first things that I think a lot of people that aren't experienced with setups do is they have the guitar set somewhere like they normally wouldn't play it. Not too many people play guitars in their laps nowadays. And then they play it with, say, fingers when they normally would play with their pick. And it just completely changes the setup.
So they set the setup for something they're never going to do.
Exactly. So whenever you're doing, like I said, this is more of a final adjustment. Just do it like how you normally would play.
Okay. Onward, brother. I'm interested.
So if you've adjusted the neck how you like it, now at this point, let's assume you put the strings on and you check the neck to make sure that it's how you like it. Well, let's say you notice, well, maybe there's some buzzing, or maybe the action is too high, but your neck is where you don't want to adjust it to be any straighter. Then you would actually adjust the action. Now, during this whole process, you'll be tuning the guitar, and that's a pretty important thing because the tuning is so important that even a half step off can really throw out the action and the relief of a guitar. And one thing I wanted to talk about, now this is probably one of the easiest things that you could do at home. I heard this from Joe Walsh. If you don't know what Joe Walsh, he's from the Eagles. He has a great YouTube video on this as well, pickup heights. Now, even like we were talking about, there's not very many things stock that I think suit every player. You know, manufacturers just have to go for a middle ground. So I'm going to plug this in real quick so we can actually hear what I'm talking about. Okay. So I'm just going to play for a second on each string, or sorry, on each pickup, because there is a difference that you want with each pickup. Now, the main thing I'm trying to test here is to see if I go from my neck pickup, then my bridge pickup is louder. Now, that might seem kind of like a trivial thing, you know, as long as each pickup is working, what's the difference? But a lot of people don't think about it. The bridge pickup is typically what a lot of people play solos on, what a lot of people go to a bridge pickup to get a sound that cuts through more. So the last thing that you want, now I'm just going to simulate this with my volume knob, is to go from this, just a really nice neck pickup sound, and then I think that would be kind of a letdown. Do you agree?
Sure.
So the one thing that you want to do with each pickup is to adjust it. You don't want anything that's too close to the strings because pickups are basically magnets. So they'll actually start to physically pull the string. You'll notice that it's not vibrating quite like it normally would. So get a safe distance away from the string and find a balance between all three of those where it feels like a natural progression going from each pickup. So the one thing I think we're getting pretty close to the point where I think that's most of what we want to go over. Because like I said, most of this is just to help anyone that's at home right now that maybe you hadn't picked up a guitar in a couple months or picked up a particular guitar in a couple months and you need it adjusted and you can't do it right now. We want this to be a resource to help you.
Sure.
So a lot of stuff I think beyond this would
Here's
be
what
something like we would get to Joe.
Let me throw some things out here like this though. I know that it's tempting. There's a lot, especially on the bridge that I'm looking at there. I thought one way we adjusted our intonation was with the adjustment screws that move the saddle back towards the neck or away from the neck to fix the intonation issue.
Correct.
Yes, no?
You're correct.
I know it's really tempting to get a screwdriver and just start turning things if it makes it better or makes it worse. And some people, that's how we learn, trial and error. But, you know, I'm old, and some people may not remember this, but there is an old Fram oil filter commercial. And basically the mechanic says, well, the guy says, I don't want to buy that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to pay for that. He says, well, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. The point being, if you mess it up, it's probably going to cost more than if you just let me do it right the first time. Are there things that, and nobody wants to use absolutes, but I think that it's our job as a music store giving advice. What are things that you're probably not going to hurt your guitar much if you do this or try this, even if you don't do it right, versus things really probably it's going to cost a lot on a setup?
Sure. Well, the main thing I would say, now I went over this specifically with the truss rod, but it applies to any of it. If you notice that there's a lot of resistance in doing something, that means that something is wrong. Not necessarily, yeah, and it's not necessarily that you're doing it wrong, but I think that's a good point to just stop, and because it's not worth any damage to your guitar to have it done right then. I mean, is there anything else you could think of?
Well, I'm going to ask you this question too. In general terms, basically, when most people say they need to take their guitar to the shop, aren't most people looking just for some setup stuff to get it playing right? Whereas real repair might involve wood breakage and or electronics that aren't working. And how do I know what is in the realm of a setup? And you tell me, because I don't know, and that's sad that I don't know. Do we have a standard flat setup fee?
Sure. I mean, typically with any guitar that comes in, if someone asks for a setup, I think we decided on $25 for any electric guitar setup.
Unless it's Floyd Rose.
Yeah, basically. So the basic income is this guitar, the Les Paul I showed earlier, anything that's pretty standard.
Because so when I say I want my guitar set up and you charge me a standard fee, you're basically going to do the things that we talked about today.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, that one of the first things we would probably do is plug it in first to make sure that there is not a apparent problem that maybe the customer was unaware of, or just to make sure that we and the customer are on the same page regarding the setup.
Got it. So another question that I'm going to say, and this is one of my favorites, that right now we're not taking in repair, obviously, for reasons that we have discussed. Now, we do have new technology, and I'll kind of cross-promote it here. We did just get a UVC lamp that's going to kill all the bugs and the any lingering virus things that might be floating around or attached to your instrument. That's for our safety as much as it is yours. So we can sterilize them unless your instrument has a nitrocellulose lacquer. That would damage that, but this standard guitar should be safe for us to run that over. Yes.
Right. Most guitars now use a polyurethane finish. Now, the one thing I would say, we kind of talked about this in a meeting the other day. Pretty much any Gibson guitar has a nitrocellulose lacquer finish. Now, I haven't followed Epiphone. I know that they've changed. I mean, they completely changed their whole line this past NAMM show. But it would just be a per guitar basis. I mean, I think we would look at everything up before it comes in anyway.
I'm just saying that we are going to be in the process of every guitar that comes in, we're going to go ahead and zap it with that UV light. But if you bring it and you know you have nitrocellulose, then you might say, oh, don't do that before we do it. The second thing is, as soon as the restrictions are lifted, I'm sure we will have a pretty big influx of repair coming in.
Right.
So I need everybody to be aware of that. And that's one of the reasons we're showing you this today. If there's small things that you can do, and please call. We are not scared. You can talk to Andrew in Odessa. You can talk to Kyler, or who else would they talk to? If Joe's in, you talk to Joe.
Yeah, if Joe's there, definitely Joe. And then Sean is also a person that's really good at setups too.
So we'll be glad to give you, listen, we're not going to take responsibility, but we'll be glad to talk to you about what you're doing and see if we recommend you wait and bring it in. And then Abilene, I'm not really sure who they got doing it there. I'm sure somebody is. They're all players. And then, Kevin's probably good at that in the Alito store. So
right. And like
all the store and ask. That's what I'm saying.
Right. And this is all supposed to just be stuff to help you get maybe the guitar playable until you can get into a shop.
I get it, but there's some people that they're 30 miles away, and if they can get an answer on the phone and they can do it, that's really a good thing for them. We're always here. We're always wanting to help. And once the restrictions are lifted, we are more than happy for you to bring it to us, and we'll look at it and say, all this needs is this, or here, you're probably going to need to learn how to do this, etc. So walk me through it one last time. I don't want to keep prolonging this, but I want to make sure we all get it. If you are hearing fret noise, if you're having trouble with your guitar being in tune up the neck, if you feel like you're playing, a cardboard box with rubber bands on it instead of the strings feel natural as you play them, you may just be looking at a setup issue. You talked about the pickups. You never said what you would do. Are you raising and lowering the pickups if they're? Is it the distance to the string? Is that what you were talking about?
Right, exactly. The pickups are always going to be resting underneath the string. Now, I don't know the exact measurement, but basically, if you get a pickup too close underneath the bottom of the string needs some room to vibrate. So if it's too close, the magnetic pull is too much so that the string won't vibrate freely. So that's all that is.
One of my favorite basses is my P bass. And sometimes I pay attention to things, or sometimes I never pay attention. And all of a sudden one day I'll go, oh, I looked at my pickups were like angled to the middle. And I thought, what have I done? I jump a lot. So maybe I've messed something up. And I took it to one of the guys. He's like, no, that's how it's supposed to be. So there is a certain angle that those go to, and we can make sure that that's correct. Would you recommend them messing with their saddles much at all, or?
I think if this is your first time ever working on a guitar, I do think saddles are probably one of the things that you can do, and there's not really going to be a whole lot of collateral damage if you mess it up.
Okay. So flip that guitar up real quick. Let me see your back chamber.
Sure.
You got a cover on it?
No, I don't.
No, it's open. Good. So there's the springs. Are those part of the? And this is on a tremolo style bridge, correct? That's that you're going to find that, and that is correct. Basically the tension that you have to push against to make the tremolo bar work correctly.
Correct. Now this is actually one more thing I wanted to go over. So you have a few different types of bridges. This is the Strat trim type bridge. I have mine floating. You might be able to see it slightly off the body.
It's lifted up off the body, right?
So that means if you're playing like here, you can go low and you can actually raise it too. So that's probably the most popular. I'll show the Les Paul again.
Well, I thought you had a cover on that one.
Right. This has the Tune-o-matic style. So the Tune-o-matic, you'll always see a separate bridge and tailpiece, whereas the Strat is an all-in-one unit. So this is probably the second most popular. And I did bring a guitar with a Floyd Rose today, so we can look at that as well.
A Wolfgang.
I'm actually noticing the setup on this could be a little better. So this is a good example. Guitars just changing weather, because I remember setting this up, maybe a month ago.
See, that just looks intimidating. Look at the screw sticking out the back, the sled, or the curvature of it. And you got fine tuners built into that. Is that part of a setup too?
The Floyd Rose is pretty complicated, so I'd be glad to go into a setup.
Maybe we need to do that as a separate one. Yeah.
Right. That would be a great one. A Floyd is definitely more complicated to set up, but once you set it up, great. And it's pretty much good to go, like I said, unless the weather changes, and then you have to adjust that.
Cool. Anything else that you would add, Rick, in as far as a setup that we didn't talk about, or?
No, not that I can think of. Kyler did a great job covering everything there.
Cool. All right, man. Well, I don't want to talk longer than we need to. Kyler, thanks for your input today. We'll look at doing a separate one on a floating tremolo and see if that's something we can have a separate conversation about. You guys leave us comments even after we're gone. Correct? This is still going to be up for a while?
Yep.
And if you ask questions, we monitor this all the time. You're more than welcome to ask, and we'll get back to you. Otherwise, call us at our stores. All 4 locations have the capability and the ability to take care of this. So we appreciate y'all. Y'all have a great weekend, it's hard, you know, it's Friday, but at this point you're almost like, that's just another day because we're all going home again this evening. But y'all be safe, stay healthy, wash your hands, don't touch your face. And we will talk to you. I am going to tell you Tuesday morning, if any of our, if you got any interest at all, one of our great friends, Karen Crutchfield, makes her own oboe reeds, and she is a fantastic player. She plays in the Middle Symphony. She will be joining us to talk about, and it's kind of geared toward teachers, but if you're curious, she'll be with us on our YouTube platform talking about how to get people started on oboe correctly. So, and then next Friday, my good friend Steven Silva is going to talk about kind of a primer to making music at home. So he's going to show you his setup, how he does it. And what I'm talking about is he's a jazz trumpet guy. He composes a lot. How he gets from here into the computer. He's set himself up and he kind of self-taught him. I'm pretty excited. You might enjoy that next Tuesday afternoon, making music at home with Steven Silva. So y'all be blessed, stay healthy, and we will talk to you when we talk to you.